standing up too high with nowhere to fall down to, empathy around you, standing looking back, you heard it all before, now losing what you didn't know you had, fearing what you want is nearing, but you're really trying to get away from it. Basic instincts overpowering, you still have this open, when this could be good enough for us. This could be good enough for us. When this could be good enough for us. This could be good enough for us. This could be good enough for us. This could be good enough for us.
Tries to hold on to the bottom. Here comes Gisette. They make contact. They touch once, twice, 3 times.
Foul trouble! Oh, no, Rocky into the wall. Big crash front straightaway. Huge crash coming into the triangle. No, Rocky up and into the air. They're beating and banging. Burn on the bottom. Cosman up top. Cosman, I think. No. Breyer by 1/1000th of a second. Joseph, no! At the line, Thunhorse pulls the win out at the stripe!
Oh, he saves it! What's going to happen here?
Here comes the canvas!
Get your foot down.
He's got it! He's got it!
This is going to win!
We're penguining at Watkins Glen. Should be a lot of fun this evening. James Pike here from Watkins Glen International, along with our producer, Zach Johnson. Sean Butler will be joining us momentarily, but we've got action coming your way from New York's Thunder Road. The Penguin Simulation RC League getting ready to go after it from the famed meadows of upstate New York and one of the fastest road courses in all of iRacing. This place is known for power, known for speed, known for a lot of long straightaways and heavy braking zones, which creates a lot of excellent passing opportunities and a lot of fun that you'll see across the board tonight as we go after it at Watkins Glen International. Time to go ahead and grid up for our sprint race. It is Flynn Lazier and Paul Bergoli starting on the front row. Taylor Carroll rolls off in the third spot. Savion Ragster starts in fourth. Daniel McDonald and Justin Nasir start fifth and sixth. Blake Reynolds and Joey Masevich start in seventh and eighth. Ninth goes to Robert Lowry, and Ryan Andrew begins in the 10th position. 11th on the grid is Morgan Burkhardt. Ray Kingsbury starts from 12th. Michael Gonzalez and Nate Stewart roll off from 13th and 14th. 15th on the grid is Michael Guerrilla. Sam Adams starts 16th. 17th is Jack Belton. Kevin Fanning is 18th on the grid. 19th will be Brandon Lambert. Starting 20th is Spencer Ray. Cody Cosgrove and Ryan Pantasillo start in 21st and 22nd. Jake Fisher rolls off from 23rd. Chris Wetz begins from 24th. Ethan Kurtz and Brian Sohn start 25th and 26th. Justin Garris will begin tonight from 27th. 28th is Alexander Ball, Marwin Mata, and Kieran Forrest complete the top 30 on the grid. Robert Kenny and Matt Kingsbury start 31st and 32nd. 33rd on the grid is Brock Quinn. He's joined on the outside of row 17 by Justin Robichaud. Gary Freeman and Marcus Siasco start from 35th and 36th. William Dunbar and Sasha Vitildas begin in 37th and 38th. Nathan Clark, Jeffrey McConey starting in 40th. Your final full course of the grid, Bronson Stafford, Kenneth Askew, Dave Askew, and Santiago Tires. Getting ready for our Penguin SimCAR Grand Am Sprint Race at Watkins Glen International, and I now get the opportunity to bring in Kevin McAdams, who has joined us in the booth. And Kevin, I love calling races at Watkins Glen because this place just ends up being a lot of fun, and you see a lot of action, a lot of really good passing opportunities, a lot of speed. This is a fast road course, a fun road course, and a great place to race. There's, I think, valid reasons aplenty as to why this is one of the most popular tracks in all of iRacing.
For sure, James. You know, I'm just now loading in. Got a wrong route from the private plane of Trevor Perry, so I'm sorry for being a little bit late. But really interesting the way this lineup's going to be. Obviously, we have the prototypes in front in the GT field. Towards the back, a couple guys like Jeffrey McConey going to have to, you know, get away from the rest of the field, try to get through these GT drivers, maybe get a little bit of experience trying to get through those. But Watkins Glen, especially the boot conversion, is a very, I wouldn't say tricky track, but it's a lot harder than you think. It's a very sweeping course, a lot of passing opportunities like you mentioned, a lot of action can happen here. And the one thing that really can help you out if, you know, you're not a, you know, high class road racer is you can learn a lot being here and you know, follow breaking points, and you can learn really quickly because this is not necessarily the hardest road course. So I think we'll see a lot of learning early on. I think we'll see some guys setting the pace and others trying to learn as this race goes on very, very methodically. I think we'll see some guys that started in the back make their way to the front.
A quick look at the track facts before we go racing. We are in Watkins, Glen, New York on this circuit that will run the boot and the inner loop. It's a 3.45 mile, 5.55 kilometer circuit with 11 turns. In sim, the time of day, August 25th, 2022. Today, as a matter of fact, 3 p.m. Eastern time, a little bit after. Air temp is 80 degrees Fahrenheit, track temp 108 degrees Fahrenheit, winds to the west at 7 miles an hour, and humidity is surprisingly low, 35%, given that we are near a lot of the Finger Lakes. You'd figure some of that moisture would bounce off into the road course, but not quite today as we get set for racing. The prototypes will lead us to the green, and we will get set to go racing from Watkins Glen in just a few moments. Flynn Lazier, Paul Bergoli leading us to the green flag at New York's Thunder Road. He steps on the gas, says Lazier. We are underway from Watkins Glen International in the sprint race.
As they hit into turn one already, starting a single file out. And I think, James, we'll see a lot of trying not to make any mistakes. I saw that last week, some guys that started near the front really messed up a lot, and they lost, a potential top 5 spot. So I think, as we'll see in the prototype field, these guys start to single file out. The GT field, I think we're going to see a lot of opportunity here. If you're starting 20th or worse, maybe make up a few spots as they head through the S's.
GT starting to charge at the hill. Prototypes are already clear of the bus stop. I think you have a very valid point in that it is incredibly easy to lose a race like this, especially in the inner loop or in the turn entering the boot. Sort of the inside of the heel ankle, you lose sort of the gravity and loose banking. It's very easy to spin yourself out on corner exit there. Looks like most drivers are going to get through the boot, or rather the inner loop, cleanly, and so everybody's going to make their way off towards the boot. We are road course racing, so we do run the boot here tonight at Watkins Glen.
If you're Tony Stewart, you want to run here in the NASCAR Cup Series. If you're anyone else, you want to run on the regular course, but these road races are very proficient, as we already have trouble in the prototype field. That's Joey Mashevitz in the number 8. Only 10 cars in the prototype field, so the worst he will start would be in 10th if he can stay in front of the GT field, but that's a tough break for Joey early on. Still pretty much settling in. Flynn Lazier already out to about a 2.5 lead. GT field much closer as they're still trying to negotiate the boot. And they're going through what I think, James, is the hardest part of the track. It almost is negative offset banking back onto the NASCAR course. Really tough to get the pedal down, get the throttle down as they go through what is turn 10 and turn 11 on the boot course.
It's the toughest test of patience, I think. And there's a lot of corners like that in that particular section of the racetrack where you have to wait to get on the throttle in order to maximize your lap time. But that one, I think, more than the others, maybe outside of the entry to the boot, probably qualifies based off of everything that you just said, that you do have to wait, you do lose the banking, it does fall away from you, and you can't just mash the throttle. You really do have to pay attention to how you step on it, how you get back into it. As we see one car already down on pit road, I believe that's Gary Freeman that's coming in with damage already. Wonder what happened to him, but a lot of damage to the left front of his Ferrari.
Oh, big trouble in the GT field. Huge wreck in the middle of the long straight, multiple cars upside down. 6, 7, 8 cars, they're still piling in. Sam Adams is involved, Indicio is involved. Bronson Stafford stuffs it into the inside guardrail. Huge wreck on the backstretch.
So many cars already in trouble. Nate Stewart was the first one that I saw that got involved with that, but that swept up just about everybody else that was coming in, that was behind into the GT field. We'll see if we can get a good look at what happens here. As you see some of the aftermath of the first replay, but I wonder where this begins. Actually, this starts properly, I think,
this
with
is battle
Ryan
for
Andrew.
second, I believe, in the GT class.
There's Andrew that bounces off and makes contact with Ray Kingsbury, and then it's all on from there. And Nate Stewart goes for a wild ride and ends up on top of one car and then on his lid later.
And it's just the wreck that keeps on wrecking. We've, obviously all adore the Talladega Nights movie where they go back to the commercial and they're still wrecking. And in this case, guys just kept plowing in. A couple notable drivers did avoid it, but that had to be, I'd have to get an official count. That has to be at least 20 cars. And we have about a 32 car field in just the GT classes alone between the pro and amateur class. That is a huge wreck And a lot of these guys, especially those who are starting up front, are going to have to make their way through the feature, make their way through the 60-minute sprint race that we have after our 20-minute sprint race. So that is going to be a huge setback for a lion's share of the GT drivers, as the prototype field, they're just chilling. They're going to try to get around the wreckage here as they go back onto the main course.
I'm looking at this. I think Justin Robichaud is the last car in the GT class that doesn't have damage. So it's 10 cars that made it out of that unscathed, and everybody else in the GT class, both the pros and the AMs, got caught up with it and have damage in some way, shape, or form.
And that's going to completely change the fabric of the GT class. You know, that took out, if you're correct, if it's pretty much the top 10, that took out 2/3 of the GT field. A couple guys that did miss it are now going to be in a fantastic spot. Justin Robichaud, as you mentioned before, started 34th, which effectively was 24th in the GT field. He will now be in 9th overall for GT, so he's going to benefit greatly. Other drivers that are going to be the complete opposite, Sam Adams, he was battling for second. He is now currently relegated in 24th overall. That effectively puts him 14th. So huge setback for a few guys. And some people decided, you know, let's just scoot through this field, scoot through this wreck, and be a huge beneficiary, as we're still battling the prototype class.
Yeah, good battles in prototype. I'm just looking through the leaderboard to try and figure out who was the biggest beneficiary outright of that incident with relation to starting position. And I think the answer to that question may be Bronson Stafford, who qualified and started on the grid in 41st and is now currently 22nd overall, and I believe somewhere in the ballpark of maybe 13th or 14th in the GTs and 5th in the amateur class. So some people benefited, other people really dropping. Ray Kingsbury in particular and Nate Stewart started 12th and 14th, currently scored 30th and 28th overall. So like you said, a lot of work for them to do in the main race coming up a little bit later.
And Ray Kingsbury, to a lot of drivers, was the favorite coming in tonight for the GT Pro category. So that is going to be a huge mountain to climb for Ray. Bronson Stafford, looking at the wreck, he actually was involved in the wreck. Just kind of plowed his way through. No cause, not a lot of damage on that number 61, so he'll do fine. Battle for position. This is going to be... Where is this? This is battle for 4th. Sorry, battle for 5th. And Ragster's going to take it over Reynolds.
Yeah, Savion Ragster, Blake Reynolds in a really good battle there. And Ragster had 5th there. Reynolds has been closing in ever so slightly. Hasn't necessarily had the opportunity to make the pass yet, but he'll run it wide there on the entry into, I believe that's, shall we call that 6? Yep, we'll call that 6. And then here's the toe of the boot, turn 7. Another one of those corners, like you were talking about earlier, turn 9, where you do have a little bit of banking, but you really do have to wait and gradually apply the throttle, because you will loop yourself around very quickly, very easily. That's exactly what happened to Joey Masevich at the start of this race. He got on the throttle too early in turn 7, spun himself out. Now he's running back 9th in class.
I've always said that, you know, I'm not really a huge road racer. I do prefer my ovals. I only like turning left, but if you want to get a master class in you know, late apex corners, I feel like Watkins Glen, especially the boot configuration, is just that. Going into the boot is a late apex. Going into the toe of the boot is a late apex. Getting through what effectively is turn 8 and 9 are all late apex corners. Back on the main course, they're pretty much normal apex corners, but if you go through the boot conversion, it is a lot to learn. And I feel like as these guys are stacking up in the S's trying to get around GT traffic, here comes Reynolds back underneath Ragster trying to go 3 wide, and he is going to go 3 wide. Fantastic move by Reynolds if he can make this work around Carroll. And no trouble! Reynolds hard into the safer barrier, takes out Taylor Carroll as well. High risk, low reward case for Reynolds. And they are both involved.
I had a hunch we may end up seeing something like that just with the way they were racing into the corner, because everything narrows up so quickly and you almost end up with a funnel effect into the inner loop, and it really caught everybody out. Reynolds just sort of drove across the line there and got swept up into it, and Taylor Carroll didn't really have anywhere to go either. And the beneficiary of all that, Savion Ragster, who now finds himself in the 4th position in class and overall and clear of any traffic by the tune of about 5 seconds. Next on the list are Lance Desir and Jeff McConey, who themselves now are in a pretty good battle for 5th.
Not sure. I can't remember if they do separate it by class on the overall grid. I believe they do. So if Blake Reynolds, who is in the pits getting towed, he had a huge suspension issue after hitting the wall. He will most likely be either 9th or 10th in the prototype class. But as you mentioned, Savion Ragster, he saw the move that Reynolds made, kind of backed off by about a half second, and ends up being the ultimate beneficiary. Meanwhile, our leader in that prototype class, Flynn Lazier, is gone. About an 8-second lead as he gets around Spencer Ray in the Porsche. He is just smooth sailing, and I think that is a preview. We saw last week that Blake Reynolds was the class of the field for the most part in terms of pace at Daytona Road Course, and I think Flynn is showing the rest of the prototype class that he is going to be the one you need to beat as we hit the 10-minute mark here in the sprint race. 10 minutes to go.
Speaking of Flynn Lazier, been a pretty big day for him as it was announced earlier today that he is going to make his Indy Lights debut when they visit Portland International Raceway on September 4th as part of the IndyCar Series weekend up in the Northwest. Able Motorsports going to be behind the wheel and giving him the car to drive, but no surprise that someone as sharp as him getting a chance at a real-life ride and has a little bit of credit already to his name. He was the 2019 Formula Atlantic champion here in North America. And oh, by the way, his dad, Buddy Lazier, may or may not have won the Indianapolis 500 some almost 30 years ago, back in 1996. So no surprise maybe then, when you think of it that way, that he's up front.
Makes a lot of sense. He has a little bit of that pink/purple on that prototype. I used to watch the IndyCar Series back in the day. Loved watching Buddy Lazier run. Won a handful of races when I would watch pretty religiously. Ended up being my favorite driver. So it's pretty cool to see his son out here racing and competing. I'm sure he'll do a fantastic job when they go to the Indy Lights Series here in a few weeks. Battle for position. This is going to be for your lead in the GT class. Michael Gonzalez had a really good effort last week. Got involved in a few incidents, but ended up doing pretty okay. He's currently trying to get around Burkhardt, who started 3rd in the GT class. He's now in 1st.
About to see the leaders in the prototype class. There's Flynn Lazier right there behind these two. So Lazier's going to have to work what will become lap traffic, and also underscores just how quick these prototypes are in relation to the GTs. Once Lazier makes the pass here on Burkhardt, that will be the entire GT field a lap down to the prototypes. But this really good battle here for 1st in class, and really good battle for 4th in class as well between Brandon Lambert and Cody Cosgrove.
Oh, trouble on the back. That's Gary Freeman again. That's his 3rd incident. Gary Freeman in the 666. He has had a rough 2 weeks so far, involved in a handful of crashes at Daytona, and he is in a precarious spot. I think it might be just a good idea to hit the tow button here for Gary. He's going to try to get back going, get back to the pits, but tough break early on.
Definitely going to have to bring it to pit road. Damage all across the race car, especially.
He is staying out.
Side. And he's going to get a soldier and troop on there. I wonder what kind of suspension damage he has. That would be the biggest question to me. But for the moment, we'll maintain our eyes on the battle for the lead in GT. There goes Michael Gonzalez making that pass around Morgan Burkhardt. Gonzalez had been setting that up for about a lap and a half, so not a huge surprise, I think, at this point to see Gonzalez make the pass and go to P1 in the GTs overall.
Gonzalez representing the title sponsor of the series, Penguin RC, in that orange and silver Mercedes. Just gotta love the way those cars sound. So once again, I think, you know, especially with this wreck, I think the GT field's gonna be a little bit more wide open when it comes to the 60-minute race. But I think this just goes to show that, you know, you can show your muscle And you know, qualifying is one thing, racing is another, and I think that's the one nice thing about this format. If you start 5th, 7th, you can methodically get your way into a better spot and set yourself up for the main feature. Here comes, that's McDonald. He's currently 2nd in the prototype class. He's going to get around this GT battle, and he's solidly going to be in 2nd, about 3.5 seconds ahead of Paul Bergoli. He's currently 3rd place.
I think the interesting thing, your point on the GTs, the fastest lap right now in this sprint race amongst the GT drivers belongs to our man in 3rd place, Michael Guerrilla, with a 1:44.692. Or at least was. Gonzalez really starting to lay the hammer down with a really, really quick lap last time by. But to the point, I guess, you know, yes, you'll have fast drivers up front. You're going to see some speed up here amongst the front of the GT grid once we get to the main race a little bit later. But I think there's a very strong possibility that the outright fastest drivers probably were caught up in that big wreck, and we may not know who's got speed. And we're probably going to have a lot of fun with the GTs in particular, because I think it's going to involve a lot of drivers charging for back to the front as we see one car going off the racetrack. Savion Ragster losing control out of the inner loop and losing positions to Jeff McConaughey, and Taylor Carroll trying to run him down.
Oh, and he's still having trouble. Number 9, that's Cody Crosgrove. And the Mercedes nearly gets into the back of him. And I think this Ragster machine's a little bit wounded. He's all over the place. Maybe some suspension damage for him. Taylor Carroll, who was involved in an incident earlier with Reynolds, gets around him. So we saw Ragster the beneficiary of an incident between Carroll and Reynolds. Now Carroll goes back around him. And that's going to be a tough break. Ragster was pretty much in his own zip code, had about a 3-second gap over Lance Nasir for 4th, and that's going to be a tough break. He's going to have to start, it looks like now 8th, with 4 minutes to go here in the sprint.
So work to be done meanwhile, continuing to keep our eyes on the lead of GT, watching the battle there. Also keeping a good eye on Cody Cosgrove and Jack Belton. That's a pro and an AM driver in GT, but it's still a good battle there within half a second of one another. 5th and 6th in the GT class. Belton, your leader amongst the amateur. And just working our way back through the field. A lot of good battles all over the place in the GT class.
Yeah, and Belton, once again, just really strong. I talked to him, and we talked to one of the Kingsbury brothers. They're both in Mercedes, representing Mercedes, and they are sharing some setup knowledge between the two. So it's not a surprise to see Belton back here up in the front. I believe it's Ray Kingsbury that's also in the Mercedes. So he's definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with. And always, as we mentioned, he just hit the wall. I believe that's in the carousel. Not sure what happened there. Just got loose off of one of the rumble strips in the bus stop, and now he has a substantial amount of damage.
It's not what you want. You'd also think, just as my mind sort of percolates through a lot of the aspects of the GT race here, this feels like a Mercedes dominant course. We think the Mercedes is a car that has a lot of straight line speed, a lot of power, benefits from a lot of the big, long, straight line courses, of which Watkins Glen most certainly qualifies. So in that sense, maybe not a huge surprise when we consider that it's Mercedes that currently hold the top 5 positions in GT. Your first car that's not a Mercedes, Kevin Fanning in the Ferrari, running in 6th.
And as you mentioned, this track is just so quick. I believe the slowest portion of the track is what we're going into right now, which is turn 1, about 80 miles an hour at the very lowest. And you know, you go through the S's, you're pretty much wide open through here. You go about 140, 150 into the S's, and then, you know, going into the bus stop, it's supposed to slow these guys down, but they have just moved that rumble strip. It's a lot wider than it used to be. It's a lot flatter than it used to be. So you can really attack. And the slowest they really go through here is about 115 if you hit it right in the GT car. So, you know, I think you're right. The Mercedes is just so quick on the straightaways. We always see them dominate at Daytona here in iRacing, and I don't think this is going to be any different this week.
Yeah, my mind immediately went to Daytona Watkins Glen as there's an incident right in front of the GT leaders, and that may give the opportunity for Burkhardt to go alongside Gonzalez, maybe complete the pass here if he sets it up correctly on the exit of the turn, coming up the hill, working their way towards turn 8, the heel of the boot, door to door, but the inside belongs to Burkhardt on the preferred lane to go into 8, but then is going to have to make sure he makes the move quickly as they make contact, and there goes Morgan Burkhardt around as Gonzalez will, in a very gentlemanly fashion, slow down and at least take a bit of a penalty.
Oh, phew, that was close. Not sure who that was. I believe someone did clip Burkhardt, and they're still wrecking right in front of him. That is Brandon Lambert in the 46. He's backing up, and he has now struck Kevin Fanning. That is just something you do not do. Let the field pass. We are on the final lap. Flynn has taken his final lap. These guys on the GT field are just now taking their final lap. He will most likely win, but chaos and pandemonium in our GT field. Michael Gonzalez did play a little bit of gentleman's rule there. Slowed down for Burkhardt to recover, but just not enough for them to make up. But now that puts Guerrilla in second. Cosgrove, he started 21st overall, 11th in class. He is now in 3rd overall in the GT field, so he has been slowly benefiting from this. As Lazier comes through the final corner, he will win the prototype division.
Let the prototypes roll out, and then we'll see where Gonzalez and Guerrilla and company finish up for the GTs. It's been standard proceedings for the most part in the prototype class. Not too much to talk about. Joey Musevich has managed to get around Taylor Carroll, who had an incident, and then Savion Rangster, Blake Reynolds, and Robert Lowry also with incidents and prototypes. So they're going to start in the back for the main. But Lazier, McDonald, and company all with all sorts of speed. It's been the GT class where it's been pandemonium in this sprint race, and I have a feeling we're going to see a very, very wild GT portion of our main race coming up in a bit.
I think if you're a GT driver, you may ask some of your friends for a spotter after that big wreck out of the S's. But I think, you know, that was just the appetizer for tonight. The racing has been really good. The racing has been very competitive, but a lot of mistakes early on in this sprint race. And I mentioned it earlier that that's the last thing you want to do. I feel like with a race this short, you really can only beat yourself. And a lot of these drivers did just that, whether they were involved in that huge wreck, or if they had a little single car incident of their own, relegated them to the back of the pack.
You see your leaders coming across the line in GT. It was Gonzalez, then Guerrilla, then Cosgrove, your top 3 with the GTs. Jack Belton, Kieran Forrest, and Justin Robichaud, your top amateur drivers in the GT class.
As the last of the drivers come across the field, or come across the line, Flynn Lazier, as we mentioned, by a pretty large margin. I don't know if McDonald was sandbagging at all. That is not right. Technical difficulties.
We'll wait for the results to come through properly. There we go. That looks a little bit more like it. So Flynn Lazier, then Dan McDonald, Paul Bergoli, Lance Desir, and Jeff McConaughey, your top 5 overall into the prototypes. Joey Musevich and Taylor Carroll, 6th and 7th. Michael Gonzalez was the fastest man in the GT class. He came home 8th. 9th went to Michael Guerrilla, and 10th overall. 3rd in GT was Cody Cosgrove.
Morgan Burkhardt in 4th in the GT class. Kevin Fanning, Jack Belton will start on your proverbial pole for the amateur class. Kieran Forrest, only 1 spot behind him, so they will start side by side for that amateur battle. Spencer Ray, Justin Robichaud, who benefited greatly, up 20 spots nearly from that 34th starting position. He will finish 16th overall. 17th, Matt Kingsbury, Bronson Stafford, Sam Adams, who was involved in that early big one in turn 4. He will start in 19th overall. That puts him 11th, I believe. 12th in the GT class. Lambert and Askew 21st.
Marcus Yasko in 22nd, 23rd with Savion Rangster. Justin Garris, 24th. 25th was Gary Freeman. Nate Clark finished 26th. 27th went to Robert Kinney. Ryan Andrew finished 28th. 29th was Brian Sohn. And Blake Reynolds completed the top 30.
Kenneth Askew, he struggled early on. He rebounds to finish 31st. This is pretty much a lot of these guys that were involved in that big wreck. Ethan Kurtz, Ray Kingsbury, Nate Stewart, Robert Lowry. He was one of the drivers in the prototype class that had a little bit of a struggle. Sachit Vadales, is it Vitaldis? We'll have to get some pronunciations on this. Jake Fisher, Brandon Pendicio, Alexander Ball, Chris Wetz, Brock Quinn, William Dunbar, and Santi Tires will round out our full field. And James, we will go to break, and I would love to see, once they get this ball rolling for the main feature, if we see these prototype guys who start in the middle of this GT field that had to pretty much tow their cars and, you know, have to start 30th or 35th if they're going to go back in front of our GT leaders.
Never mind the fact you've got all those fast GT cars in the middle that we'll have to keep our eyes on as well. We will take a quick break and we will be back with the main race for the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series in just a few. Welcome back to FTFGG's coverage of the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series live from Watkins, Glen International here on iRacing. James Pike alongside Kevin McAdams as we get set for our feature race after a wild sprint race. Flynn Lazier cleaned house in the prototypes. Michael Gonzalez was the fastest man amongst the GTs, but it was GT chaos all over the place with one of the biggest wrecks I've ever seen in any race I've called at Watkins Glen, because it happened right at the top of the S's where you're in excess of anywhere from 130 or 140 miles an hour, and there just wasn't much you could do if you came in and piled in towards the back end of that, Kevin. We saw a few replays in the break, but it was just massive, and it seemed like it just never would end.
And we even mentioned off air, you know, it's just one of the probably the worst areas to have a pileup. We've seen that happen here in real life. We saw that in the Busch East series here about 20 years ago, and that involved about 10 to 12 cars. In this case, involved 2/3 of our GT field, about 20 cars. Not sure what the official tally is. I'd say 20 to 22 is a good estimate, but that has set this field to have a lot of good drivers coming from the back. Overall, you have, I'd say, 10 prototypes, so, you know, Ray Kingsbury, who started 3rd in the sprint, he will now start 33rd overall, so 23rd in the GT class. Nate Stewart started in 5th. He will start 24th in the GT class. Many other guys in the same predicament as those two, but it's going to be a unique situation where we're going to see a lot of drivers who are going to be in the middle of the pack, and that spells disaster very often here on iRacing, especially as being impatient, and with it only being 60 minutes, and we've already seen chaos tonight, could be a long night for those guys.
Let's also not forget that you're going to have at least 2-3 prototypes actually in the mix of all those fast GT drivers in Savion Ragster, Blake Reynolds, and Robert Lowry. We know that the difference in pace can also make things interesting too, and I would expect on that opening lap in particular, you're going to see the prototypes try and just blitz through all the GTs, but when you get to the inner loop on the back half of the course, everybody's going to have to slow down. That could be calamitous, to say the least.
And we already saw with Blake Reynolds, with Taylor Carroll, you know, going 2 and 3 wide, going into the inner loop. It is a great passing zone, but you got to be really careful not to go side by side and make any contact. Blake Reynolds, huge wreck in the sprint. He will start effectively in, I believe, 30th overall. So, and once again, I would love to get clarification. I'm sure we'll get it once they officially grid. I would love to see if they do put him back with his prototype colleagues, but if he ends up starting in 30th, that is going to be a very, very tall hill to climb for last week's winner.
Working our way through the last minute and a half plus of the warm-up, just looking here at some of the fast drivers. Not too many folks have set times, but Paul Bergoli with a 1:32.4, Jack Belton with a 1:44.3. The only times that we've seen set amongst the drivers in the field as we get set to go racing from Watkins Glen International. Should be a tremendous amount of fun, I think, across the board to see how things are going to pan out here at Watkins Glen and see who ends up winning the main race in tonight's SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series event at Watkins Glen International.
Just listening to warm up, a lot of chatter, a lot of banter, a lot of pointing fingers, a lot of accusations, and we, you know, that is a big part of the sim racing community. Is, you know, you can talk to your competitors live in real time, and you know, you can pretty much say whatever you'd like to say to the guy that wrecked you. So a lot of heated tempers early on, and we haven't even started the race. Got 60 minutes left of racing, and I think a lot of guys have a lot to prove tonight, and others are trying to maybe exact some vengeance on some guys later on in this race. We'll have to find out. 23 seconds left in our warm-up. Long night to go.
A long night to go, an hour, and some drivers already heated, and I would argue probably a little bit more heated than you would expect at Watkins Glen, a little bit more frustrated than normal given the way things panned out in the sprint race, and I wonder to what degree those tempers will affect everyone as we get set to grid up here for the main race in just a few moments. And as warm-up concludes, we will turn our attention to the starting grid momentarily as the cars will head back to pit road, and we will tell you where everyone is starting for the main race. Flynn Lazier and Daniel McDonald, Paul Bergoli, Justin Nasir, Jeff Piconi, Joey Masevich, and Taylor Carroll. That's your top 7 all prototypes. 8th overall, first in GTs, Michael Gonzalez, then Michael Guerrilli and Cody Cosgrove to start 2nd and 3rd in class and round out the top 10.
Morgan Burkhardt, we saw him battling for that GT Pro lead. He will start in 4th in his class, 11th overall. Kevin Fanning, Jack Belton, he will start on your pole for the amateur division of the GT class. The outside pole for the amateur class, Kieran Forrest, he will start 14th overall. Spencer Ray, a big beneficiary of that incident, he will start in 15th. Robichaud in the amateur class, he will start 3rd in the class. Matt Kingsbury in 17th. Bronson Stafford started 41st in the sprint race. He will start now in 18th overall in this field. Sam Adams, Brandon Lambert rounds out your top 20.
21st of the grid is Dave Askew. Marcus Siasco will start 22nd. 23rd will be Savion Rangster, and Justin Garris will roll off from 24th. Gary Freeman, Nathan Clark completing row 13 overall. Robert Kenny and Ryan Andrew starting 27th and 28th. Brian Sloan 29th on this grid. Blake Reynolds starts in at 30th.
And as I watch the grid, prototype cars are going to be at the front. So move guys like Robert Lowry, Blake Reynolds back to the front, so they will start 8th, 9th, and 10th instead of in the middle of our GT field. Starting 31st overall will be Kenneth Askew, Ethan Kurtz 32nd, Ray Kingsbury in 33rd, Nate Stewart 34th, Robert Lowry, as I mentioned, will provisionally start 35th. He will be 10th overall, 10th in the prototype class. Sachit Vitalidis, he will start in 36th. Marwin Mofta in 37th, Jake Fisher 38th, Ryan Pendicio 39th. 40th is Alexander Bell, Chris Wetz 41st, Brock Quinn 42nd, William Dunbar 43rd, and our caboose for the evening, Pro Series GT driver Santi Tires, he will start 44th, and I'm not even sure he's in the field. Oh, yeah, there he is. All right, yeah, he will definitely be the caboose tonight.
Here as a former driver in the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing series, as we get set to roll and rock on with it here. A few updates on the time of day. We moved to about 4:15 or so in sim on August 25th, 2022. Air temp is still 80 degrees Fahrenheit, but track temp is now down to 97 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity 36%, so that's come up a little bit. Winds to the southwest at 7 miles an hour on this 3.45 mile, 5.55 kilometer length circuit. The Grand Prix circuit with the inner loop and the boot, 11 turns all in total. The drivers now making their way through turns 6 and 7, the sort of inside of the ankle and then the toe of the boot. Working their way up the hill towards the heel, and not too long before we go racing at Watkins Glen in the main, Kevin.
And we saw last week they ran at night at Daytona Road Course. They're going to be running here in the mid-afternoon here in New York, and I believe we will see that wick turn up just a little bit on aggressiveness as the sun starts to set. We're not going to see it set all the way. It'll be about 5:30 by the end of the race. I think we'll see the track temp continue to go down. I think we'll see the aggressiveness continue to go up as not only the ambient temperature comes down as well, but the grip on the track will increase as they're coming out of the boot now.
Prototypes beginning to form up behind Flynn Lazier, getting ready to start their main for 60 minutes of action here at Watkins Glen International. They are all set to go, lined up behind the iRacing pace car, working their way through turns 10 and 11, and we'll see when Lazier will step on the throttle to get after it and go. It'll be McDonald, Paul Bergoli, and Lance Nasir who are ready to try and give it chase as the pace car will duck and turn, and Lazier will wait and wait and wait to now step on the gas pedal. Prototypes are underway with the feature race for the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series at Watkins Glen. We now wait for the GTs to make their start just behind them as Michael Gonzalez leads the GT class down the front straightaway and underneath the flag stand for the first time as the prototypes begin the charge up the hill through the S's.
And a quick note for the prototype class, only 8 cars for the feature tonight. Joey Mashewitz and Jeffrey McConey both disconnected and are out of the race. So only 8 cars in our prototype class as the GT cars go through the S's. Already seeing some contact in the back half of the field, top 5, top 8, making the top 10 to 15 now, all single file in that GT category. Back towards the prototype field, a little bit of battle for position. That is going to be for 4th as they go into the boot, James.
Lots of battling here amongst the prototype machines. Lots of battling between the GTs, all single file as they work their way through the toe of the boot. They turn to the inside and push the issue and push up the hill. Meanwhile, GTs, I think for the most part, all in good shape as they work their way down into the boot for the first time here. The prototypes as they come through the heel of the boot side-by-side battle towards the back of the prototype class. I think that's Taylor Carroll who's trying to fight with Savion Rangster, and lots of action across the board as the prototypes will work their way back towards start finish to complete the first lap here. The GTs fighting for position.
Glen will lead lap 1 in the prototype class. Second will be Dan McDonald. Bergoli third. Nasir and Reynolds are dead zone drivers, 4th and 5th. Carroll 6th. Lowry 7th. That's a battle for 7th. Ragster in 8th. Back to the GT field. Gonzalez already has about 8/10 of a second lead as they complete lap 1. Matt Kingsbury and Sam Adams. Sam Adams was involved in that big wreck in our 20-minute sprint race. He's looking to get his way through the field. He will take that spot, use all of that horsepower in that Mercedes GT3, but Kingsbury throws it into turn 1, almost a little bit of contact as they go into 1.
Big time battle here. This is for 8th in the GT class. Kingsbury to the inside, Adams to the outside as they sweep up through the S's and onto the long back straightaway. They will likely be door to door through the inner loop. They almost made contact on the exit of the S's, but look at the run from Sam Adams, who got a great drive out of the S's down the backstretch. He clears Matt Kingsbury, move Adams up to 8th in class, or 6th in class rather, and 8th in the GTs.
And we've seen already that Mercedes just has a ton of pull down the straightaways, not to mention had the slipstream down the back straight. Now going to get around Kevin Fanning. I'm sorry, that's Kieran Forrest, one of the amateur drivers. He will look low. That'll be for 15th overall and 7th in class. Sorry, 6th in class. Forrest gets a little bit loose. Trouble in the back. More trouble. Robert Kenny is in the grass. This is towards the back half of the field for the GT class. He's still in the grass. He's going to just stay out of the way.
He was trying to avoid, I think, his teammate Bronson Stafford, who got sideways on the entry into the boot. Again, another one of those tricky corners, just sort of lost it underneath him, and then Kenny tried to go wide to avoid it and got off track and hit the grass and hit the fence right where there's a little entry point for service cars. So it's a little bit of a weird angle, and that created a significant amount of damage to the right-hand side of Kenny's machine. I suspect he will likely try and limp it back to pit road as you get a good shot at some of the GT battles ahead of us. This is Kieran Forrest, Spencer Ray, and now here's a replay of what happened to Robert Kenny. You'll see him come into frame on the right-hand side right about there. And there's that awkward angle that I was talking about where if he had hit it on the tire barriers, the damage might not be as bad, but as such, that's a lot of damage not only to the body on the right-hand side, but the suspension of his Lamborghini as well.
A little bit of inadvertent friendly fire that we also saw on Sunday in the NASCAR Cup Series. Ross Chastain getting involved in an excursion and causing F1 driver and champion Kimi Räikkönen to be involved in a wreck. A little bit of incidental, I got to get around this action as they go into the boot, and now both the FRN cars involved and with a ton of damage as they're going to have to just limp their way through this race. Battle for position, that's going to be for second. That's Guerrilla and Burkhardt. Guerrilla came out of, I would say this is his come out of retirement series, took a little bit of a break, retired from the Coke series, something you really talk about in the sim race world. People do in fact, quote unquote, retire. A lot of guys didn't anticipate Guerrilla to be a part of this, but he's done a fantastic job so far, currently in second. But Burkhardt all over the back of them, and they go out of turn 9.
Guerrilla had a lot of changes. Graduated from UNC Charlotte, moved with his girlfriend to Raleigh, North Carolina, and had to essentially set up a new life there. So I think can be forgiven a little bit for taking a break from sim racing to get his bearings back in order. But now all sorted, now all set, and now pushing down this front straightaway and trying to run down Michael Gonzalez, who is clear by about 2.5 seconds. I think the interesting thing, if we get a good look at the front end of Michael Guerrilla's car, I think there is just a hint of damage to the left front of his machine. I don't know if we can get a closer look at it, but I've seen a few cars, especially the Mercedes in particular, pick up that same sort of damage by aggressively running over the curves, especially in the inner loop that these drivers are coming up to. And I wonder whether or not that will affect them as this goes forward. It's not a lot of damage, but it's just enough to give you pause, make you wonder, especially when you consider that Gonzalez has a clean race car and Morgan Burkhardt does as well.
And I can confirm on lap 3 when he was battling for position with Burkhardt, entering the inner loop, entering the bus stop, he did incur that left side damage when he went over the first bus stop curb there. So that is, just a tough break. Hopefully it doesn't affect the performance too much as he is losing a position right now to Burkhardt. So that relegates him back to third in class, maybe try to go back here on the inside. He's just going to follow Burkhardt here down the straight, but that is a really random place to get a little bit of damage there. It's a tough break, so hopefully it doesn't affect his performance too much, as he's starting to lose a little bit of ground to Burkhardt as they go uphill.
It was a good look there on board just a few moments ago, so you can see that damage up close on Michael Gorilia's machine. I think I want to say Sam Adams, I think, also has the same kind of damage too on his Mercedes. So that's something to be mindful of, especially for the Mercs in particular, who certainly had the pace advantage here, but they're still all chasing Michael Gonzalez. Meanwhile, how about Ray Kingsbury?
Trouble.
Oh, yes, indeed. Justin Robichaud, who went off around 6 or 7. We'll see if we can get a look at what happened, but looks like he might have caught the curb, might have just gotten loose on exit and looped himself into the tire barrier. Here's a look at the replay. We'll see what happened. This is entering turn 6. Robichaud sweeps to the corner and, yep, just loses the rear end on corner exit, bounces off the wall and into the fence he goes, and now down pit road to try and get service. So we'll see whether or not Robichaud can improve. But back to the point I was going to make with Ray Kingsbury. Kevin, you said earlier that a lot of folks had him as one of the favorites. He got caught up in that incident in the sprint race, but now in the main, he is the hardest charging driver of them all in the GT class. Started in 33rd overall, up to 18th in the overall, and 9th in class 8. If you discount Jack Belton, who leads the AMs, he's 5th in the GTs as it stands.
Yeah, Kingsbury and that Mercedes making use of all of that car. And like I mentioned, he was definitely talked as the class of the field, and right now the competitiveness of this GT field I think is going to play into his favor. Despite passing all those cars, he is only about 8 to 9 seconds behind our leader of Michael Gonzalez. Give that about maybe 10 to 12 seconds, but he's got a lot of cars about 5 to 6 seconds ahead of him. He's got Cosgrove, Belton, Adams, Fanning, his brother Matt Kingsbury, all ahead of him, only about a handful of seconds ahead of him. Battle for position. Belton currently under pressure from Sam Adams. That is not a battle in class, but a battle overall, as Belton tags the safer barrier on the exit of 11.
Some trouble for Belton. Meanwhile, good look at the GTs here coming down the front straightaway. This is good stuff across the board as we go after it and continue to watch all these battles all the way through the corner. Good stuff here between Sam Adams and Jack Belton. Adams the pro, Belton your leader amongst the AMs, but Adams gets the job done in the S's, now goes up to 5th in class.
Bit of an incident almost for the prototypes. These guys are going through this GT field. Blake Reynolds had to pretty much go off course to avoid one of the GT drivers. Have to get a replay to see who it was, but he was right behind in trouble. He wrecks his teammate Nasir into turn 1. Nasir backpedals it into the field, gets hit by another GT car. So once again, these GT guys just becoming huge issues for these prototype drivers, and an unforced error for Reynolds gets into his teammate Lance Nasir. That puts him from 5th to 8th. Reynolds stays in 4th, loses a ton of time, but that is a tough break for the Penguin RC cars as they go into 1.
Gonna get a look here at what happened between Reynolds and Nasir, and you're right, we talked about it in the warm-up to this race, that lap traffic for the GTs likely was going to cause some issues for the prototypes, and that the speed difference may end up being problematic. And you can see just how deep Reynolds closed from. Nasir had to check up to avoid the other GTs, and Reynolds was just sort of on his line already and couldn't really do much of anything, and around Nasir went, and Nasir now back to 8th in class and lost somewhere in the ballpark of about 11 to 12 seconds in that exchange.
And we talk about this traffic affecting not only drivers in terms of what just happened. Trouble on the back. That is the 38 car. That is, trying to get a name here,
Sachit Vitaldis, who goes around deep in the field, currently 31st in the GT class.
But as I was going to mention, James, they have lost a ton of time to Lazier. Dan McDonald and Blake Reynolds were, I would say, about 7.5 seconds behind our prototype leader in Lazier. They are now north of 10 seconds, make it 9.5 seconds on Lazier. So negotiating that traffic going to be really crucial, especially from second on back. If you can negotiate it better than your counterparts, you can make up a ton of time as they go through the S's.
Flynn Lazier's in his own zip code. Let's just go ahead and put that out there and make that very clear. He's ahead by about 9+ seconds. However, pretty good battle for second in prototype and overall between Dan McDonald and Paul Begoli. You see them fighting on screen just a few moments ago, and now they work their way through the GT traffic and work their way. I believe that might be Burkhardt, Burkhardt's teammate rather. They're trying to clear, but McDonald and Bergoli only separated by about a second. As you're going to get on board here, they try and cut their way through the GT traffic and not end up in trouble the same way that Reynolds and Nasir did a few moments ago.
And fortunately for Reynolds, unfortunately for Nasir, Nasir did sustain a lot of damage just because he got clipped by a GT car. 66 of Reynolds, he's pretty much clean in that white number 66. So, you know, he can make his way back here, battling for a podium spot. Bergoli right now about 2.5 seconds ahead of that 66 of Reynolds. But McDonald also only a handful ahead of him, 9.7 seconds behind Lazier, but only about a second ahead of Bergoli. As these guys now, here comes that Reynolds machine right behind Bergoli. He is right there as they go into 11.
McDonald, Bergoli fighting for spots, continuing to push Blake Reynolds, continuing to climb up the leaderboard. Even with that incident with Nasir, he's still putting down some quick lap times. Last time by, he was a solid 2 seconds faster on the stopwatch. Now, granted, Bergoli had to deal with the lap traffic, but all of a sudden, you've got a really good battle for third overall and in class. As look at Reynolds put the crossover on Bergoli coming down the back straight to the inner loop.
Getting around the GTM driver of Kieran Forrest. Bergoli throws it in there. Reynolds just trying not to have that same mistake. Bergoli off track, overshot the bus stop by about, I'd say, 200-300 feet. Was wondering why he went in so deep, but he is going to fall back now to fourth in the prototype class. That will allow Taylor Carroll to attack for fourth as they continue to negotiate GT traffic. Reynolds up to third.
Reynolds with plenty of place, plenty of speed, plenty of space now to work with. You got Ray Kingsbury that he's about to lap, but got some time to get around these GT cars and make the charge to go after Dan McDonald. That's now only a, call it 2.5 second gap. Reynolds is coming on very strong, very quick, with lots of speed, beginning to run down McDonald to try and get second.
Speaking of having a strong performance, showing Sam Adams, he is currently now put him in fourth in the GT class overall. Just got around Cody Crosgrove for that fourth spot as they negotiated the boot. He is turning some really good laps. Last time by, a 44 with a 3.44. Our leader in Gonzalez, a 43.9. So only about 2 or 3 tenths, 4 tenths, as we have trouble. I believe that was Taylor Carroll. Pulls off. Got to see what happened to him.
Carroll ends up in trouble, and Spencer Ray of the GTs also just about the same thing that Justin Robichaud did in turn 6. Got loose on corner exit, looped it around. However, Ray, well, actually, no. I thought Ray was able to keep it out of the fence, but same thing.
Jack Belton in the GTM class, I don't know if he got a little bit tight, knocks Taylor Carroll into that safer barrier on the exit of 11, and Carroll nearly flipped almost. Came across the track and the car is just broken. He's crab walking as soon as he hits the outside wall, and that will spell the end of Taylor Carroll's race. He will finish 8th overall at this point in the prototype class. So a tough break for Carroll. Gets involved in a wreck in the sprint race, gets involved in a wreck, both not really of his doing here in the feature. And Spencer Ray, we saw what happened earlier, does the same thing, hits that tire barrier on the exit of 10, and just has to sit and wait for traffic to go by.
That's a really tough break, I think, for Taylor Carroll. Not much he could have done in that incident, as you get a good look at Spencer Ray, who was able to loop it around and get going once again, albeit down plenty of positions. He's now scored 23rd amongst the GTs combined, 30th overall, trying to work his way back up towards the front. They are still chasing, however, Michael Gonzalez and Morgan Burkhardt. Those two first and second in your GT class. And then you look and see, trouble for Paul Bergoli, I think. Get another car around as well. Is that Kieran Force?
Yes.
Lots of issues here. Let's find out what happened to Paul Bergoli, though, who had been running up to, I think, 3rd or 4th in class. I don't know if he ended up with trouble, ended up with problems, but Brigoli, I think, just lost it on his own coming out of the carousel.
Looking at-
another car around.
Looking at Mafta in the GT class, he gets involved. Self spins, hits the tire barrier. This is Kieran Forrest. And turn 10 is just calamity corner for these GT cars. He hits the guardrail. Hard impact on the rear. Spencer Ray again. Self spins. Man, that grass. A lot of controversy about grass in iRacing, but it can still loop you around if you clip it wrong. And Spencer Ray found the guardrail yet again. We talked about Brigoli in the prototype class. He self-spun out of the inner loop, out of the bus stop, and he called it quits for the day. So a lot of attrition here in the feature, James.
A lot of attrition indeed. There's their Brigoli incident right there, who just, looped it and lost it and quit it, because I think he recognized he wasn't going to be catching up to anyone, a McDonald or Reynolds or company, as we continue to work our way through our main race tonight at Watkins Glen International in the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series. Good battle here. This is Ray Kingsbury and Jack Belton fighting for 6th and 7th amongst the GTs. Belton, your AM class leader. Kingsbury trying to jump up to 6th in class, and he will go to the inside, and I suspect make the pass once they come out of turn one to make their way down the hill a little bit back up towards the S's.
There was a hard charger award. I think we'd have to give it to Ray Kingsbury preemptively. He has made his way through this pack. That will give him now 21 spots up from the start of our 60-minute feature. Only 19 minutes and change in, and we have another incident. That's Lance Nasir, was currently 6th in class, going through the bus stop, just clipped the rumble strip a little bit wrong. Not a lot of contact from that guardrail. He will most likely continue on just fine if he so chooses. A tough break for Nasir. Has not had the luck he's needed. Got contact with his teammate and Blake Reynolds in turn 1 about 5 minutes ago. And now he self-spins in the rumble strip through the inner loop.
It's been tough for Lance Nasir all night long, no doubt about it, as we'll jump a little bit further back. This is Matt Kingsbury, Kevin Fanning, and Brandon Lambert amongst the GT's 8th, 9th, and 10th in class, working their way towards the heel of the boot. This is turn 8 they enter now.
And Matt Kingsbury, a little bit of a different car. I expect he did this also at Daytona. You would think that the Kingsburys would be in sync. He has chosen to race the Audi, and I think that might be a good car to choose at more of the technical road courses, but he is definitely on borrowed time here at Watkins Glen. He was just a little bit off at Daytona road course as well. So, he's doing the best he can right now in that Audi, but it's just right now the Mercedes are just all so strong. Gonzalez, currently our leader, I'd say it by about 4 to 6 seconds over Morgan Burkhardt. Sam Adams now has made his way up to 3rd in the GT class, got around Michael Guerrilla a handful of minutes ago, and he is now up 10 spots, give him the 3rd position.
Continuing to push are a lot of these drivers, as you get a good look at Gonzalez and company, and lots of folks just fighting their way through traffic, fighting their way through the field, and fighting to make things happen here. Brian Sloan, Jake Fisher now on the battle. This, I believe, is for 2nd and 3rd in the AM class in GT.
I believe you are right. Brian Sohn has it. Jake Fisher wants it. This is going to be 20th and 21st overall, but as you mentioned there, James, 2nd and 3rd for the AM class. And the amateur class was really competitive last week. No different this week. Even with Belton up about 6-7 spots, they're not that far back from our leader in the GT class, GTM class in Belton. So these guys can continue to launch good laps. Could catch our leader, but right now, the only thing Fisher is focused on right now is trying to get around this Sohn machine as they go into the toe of the boot, trying to exit now. In this corner, like I mentioned, just so hard to put the throttle down, even in these high-powered, high downforce tires. And trouble right in front of them. That is Justin Garris in the 53. He was actually ahead of these guys. He was 19th overall.
That, I think, could have been a lot worse than it was, but Garris stuck there off the racetrack and waiting to get going, which certainly a little bit better than what we saw in the sprint race. There were a few drivers that came back across active racetracks, and so now we return our attention to the battle between Brian Sohn and Jake Fisher, these for the last 2 podium spots in the AM class.
Sohn gets a little bit of breathing room. I believe Fisher just has to catch his breath a little bit after seeing a car sideways right in front of him on the exit of the boot. But using that slipstream through the S's, gets a huge run, 152, 153 miles an hour, 158, 150, about 5 miles an hour advantage if you get in that slipstream going into the bus stop. Fisher, a little bit more conservative entering the boot, or entering the bus stop, gets a little bit of a run, but Sohn gets a really good exit and will re-gap Fisher. A little bit of give and take through there. Long way to go, 37 minutes left in the race.
As we will continue to watch this battle and a lot more as coverage of the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series from Watkins Glen will continue in just a few moments. We'll be back in just a bit on FTFTG. Welcome back to FCFTG's coverage of the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series from Watkins Glen. James Plank alongside Kevin McAdams bringing you all the action from upstate New York, where we continue to watch a lot of these drivers work their way around. As trouble for Blake Reynolds coming out of turn 11. I just saw it out of the corner of my eye, but he is stuffed in the fence, and that could be game over for Reynolds this evening after driving his way up to as high as 3rd in the overall standings.
And James, he was right behind our 2nd place competitor, and McDonald overcame about a 2.5 second gap to McDonald, clips that grass, and you can see there's a little bit of a grass groove being developed, and you can see right there, just barely clips it, gets loose, and this has just been the trouble spot and just gets stuck right in that safer barrier, and that is going to be the end of his night. He is done for the night, and we have pit stops not only in the prototype class but in the GT class as well, right near halfway.
Lots of drivers beginning to come down for service. Jake Fisher is in the GTs. Ryan Petticillo is in the GTs as well. You would expect to see some of your leaders of the prototypes come down not before too long, as a lot of these drivers continuing to work their way around and cycle through the pit stops. So we'll see where everyone lands once the pit stops are over. And then at that point, you figure probably about a 20 to 25 lap sprint to the finish as Justin Garris has run into trouble on the exit of the inner loop, and Looks like same issue for him. Just caught the curb weird, caught the grass weird, tried to overcorrect, and bam, into the barriers on exit of the inner loop.
Oh no, and he just kills the barriers again, and he is done.
Second time he looked at it, he's like, nope, that's it. We're done. We're finished. Is now back to Sam Adams, who has made his way up to second. It's been quite the drive from Sam Adams, who started 19th overall in the grid. He's up to 8th overall and second in GT, and is about 13 seconds back of Michael Gonzalez. But an inspired run from Sam Adams in his Mercedes tonight.
Sam Adams, a former real driver, ran some Porsche Cup races back in the day up in the north. A little bit too tall for the GT cars, so he's now had to pivot his way into the sim racing crowd. He's done a fantastic job so far tonight. Michael Gonzalez, I think, just a big beneficiary of starting up front. I believe these guys are pretty much matching in pace at this point. Guerrilla in now third, Cosgrove fourth. Burkhardt, who started second in class, third in class, he is now fifth as they exit the boot. Gonzalez just got to pretty much mind this gap, and we see in both classes there, James. Gonzalez about a 12.5, 13-second gap, and Lazier, we already mentioned, we're not even talking about him just because he is just so dominant. He has a 20, almost 21-second gap to the second place driver and Dan McDonald in the prototypes.
Big gap to Dan McDonald, and Savion Ragster has made his way up to third. We haven't said his name much. We talked about him a little bit in the sprint race. He had some issues in the sprint race, but in this main race, he's done a really nice job of being quietly consistent, has a podium spot behind Dan McDonald, and is essentially taking advantage of the issues that a lot of our other drivers in the prototypes have had. You think of Paul Bergoli, who ran into the fence, Taylor Carroll, who went around, Blake Reynolds, who ended up in trouble, and Lance Desir, who got spun by Blake Reynolds. Ragster's been the one who hasn't been involved in incidents, and he and Robert Lowry now up to third and fourth overall and in class.
And, we even talked about a little bit in the sprint race, just trying to set yourself up for the feature and just not to beat yourself when it came to being in a good spot for the feature. Same thing applies here in the feature for this 60-minute race. You make the least amount of mistakes, you might turn a 20th place run into an 8th to 10th place run. If you're in the prototypes, I would say Savion Ragster was going to be a solid 5th to 7th place car. He is now up to third. Robert Lowry, who's had a pretty tough evening, he's only 2 seconds behind Ragster. He's in fourth overall, fourth in the prototype class. He could easily make his way into the podium.
Could potentially, as you see lots of drivers working their way around and through all the madness, just trying to keep themselves sane. I think at this point, as we approach the halfway point of tonight's race at about 30 seconds or so. And Flynn Lazier's done a nice job pacing this field overall, well clear of everybody else by somewhere in the ballpark of about 21, coming up on 22 seconds. And it's a similar story here for Michael Gonzalez that you see on your screens. He leads the GT class and the GT Pros up on Sam Adams, who's second by 11 seconds. Someone else is now on the fence. Can't quite tell who that is, but trouble a little bit further back. I think that's Bronson Stafford, who got loose over in the corner and ends up in the fence. Same thing that Robert Kenny ended up doing. So now it's his teammate that ends up in trouble. And Stafford, we saw him have issues earlier here. This time it was all on his own, and he'll loop it around and slide back to 17th amongst the GT drivers, and I believe 6th amongst the amateurs.
I believe if you're part of the Flat Out Racing Network, you want to just be a little bit more careful entering the boot. That is now 3 cars that have had issues going through there, and he is once again off track. Still maintains pace for now, but almost hit the guardrail exiting the boot now through turn 10. So tough break for Bronson. Still doing pretty okay when it comes to the overall position for him. 19th overall, make it 20th overall, 4th in class as he comes in for his pit stop.
Continuing to push the issues. You get a good look here at Flynn Lazier, well clear of everybody and working his way to lap Brandon Lambert, as we're seeing a lot of this field now fall somewhere in the ballpark of 3 laps down to the prototypes who just have absurd amounts of pace. It's Mount, call it a 10-second difference in lap times between the leaders in the prototypes and the leaders in the GTs. Your prototypes running just over a 130-ish, and right there, conveniently, there's your leader in GT. Michael Gonzalez coming down for his pit road service and his one stop of this main, and a little bit earlier compared to everybody else as well. He's the only car amongst the top 10 that's decided to come in this early, so I wonder if this forces everyone else to jump and get in to make sure that they avoid getting undercut or overcut.
Yeah, you normally see guys maybe 2-3 seconds behind the leader try to perform that undercut. And in this case, it would be an overcut here in these GT cars. He is down and away, and we'll see where he settles out between him and Adams. Adams was about, I'd say, 11 seconds or so behind Gonzalez. We'll see, as he's currently negotiating the bus stop, if Adams decides to pit this time, not to lose any more positions. But as this race has progressed, as the tires have worn, they really haven't lost a lot of pace. They're pretty much around the same pace that they had in qualifying. 143.9 last time by for Adams. I believe his fastest lap was north of around 143.5. So not a lot of pace loss. So we'll just have to see how much time Gonzalez loses on those cold tires and see if Sam Adams pits either this lap or the next.
Remember that Gonzalez had about an 11-second lead over Sam Adams before the pit stop, so I'll be curious to see how the deltas pan out and whether or not we see a change in that gap between Adams and Gonzalez once Adams comes down to make his stop. Here's your overall leader, Buddy Lazier, in for his stop over the course of this main, and we'll keep an eye on Sam Adams too, who now is scored as the leader in the GTs. He's coming through turn 10 and 11 now, and we'll see whether or not he responds to coming down pit road after Gonzalez did. No, Adams is going to stay out another lap, so he will at least complete one more circuit. It will at least be a 2-lap difference between the pit stops of Gonzalez and Adams once this cycles through. Could be more, depending on whether or not Adams decides to stay out longer.
Glen Lazier down and away for his one and only pit stop. Dan McDonald, who's second overall in the prototype class, he comes in for his one and only stop, 23 seconds behind Lazier. As you mentioned, Sam Adams stays out. Guerrilla also staying out. Kingsbury, who has now made his way up from 33rd overall to 8th overall, put him third for now in that GT class. Jack Belton, who has been the class of the field in the amateur class, he is still out there. He is still in the lead. Ray Kingsbury coming over the comms. He will come in this time by. So a lot of guys. Brian Sohn, we talked about him competing for second in the amateur class. He's in the pits.
They continue to push. Lazier's done with the pit stop. All of your prototypes, actually, as a matter of fact, have come down pit road. So it's all about the GTs and all about what Sam Adams decides to do. Gonzalez has cycled out as it stands. He sits in the 8th position. He is about 2 seconds back of Nate Stewart, who currently runs in 7th amongst the GTs. But, of course, that will all change because Stewart is yet to pit, and Sam Adams and Michael Guerrilla, Ray Kingsbury, Jack Belton, Matt Kingsbury, Kevin Fanning, Santi Tires, and Chris Wetz. That's your list of drivers yet to come down pit road at this time as you get a good look at some of the GT drivers there. There's Gonzalez, rather, working his way through the boot. And now here comes Sam Adams to pit road. He will make his way out of turn 11 onto the pit straight. And so now we'll watch the pit road time, the lane time, and the box time and see how that compares to Gonzalez and where Adams comes out as a result. Looks like he's going to bring a few more people with him. Michael Guerrilla will respond and come down pit road. And I think Ray Kingsbury will do the same. So lots of drivers coming in. This is the 20th lap for your leaders in GTs coming to lap 21.
And looking at Gonzalez's stop a few laps ago, looks like they're going to be at least double stinting these tires. So fuel only, most likely the call for Sam Adams in that number 27. We'll see where he comes out as we watch Gonzalez go into turn 1. Adams down and away. We'll have to see where the gap is once he comes out. But it looks a lot, I would say, just eyeballing it, Gonzalez was in the pits a little bit shorter compared to Sam Adams. We'll see where the gap is, but he is out and onto the pit exit. We'll find out where he comes out, but Gonzalez definitely going to hold on to the lead.
2 seconds longer pretty much across the board. Lane time is a 44.5 to a 46.2, but here's the big number. 16.6 pit stop time for Gonzalez, 18.3 seconds for Sam Adams, and I would almost be willing to bet a significant amount that difference is explained by the amount of fuel and extra fuel that Adams had to take, as we have one car around in the toe of the boot. I'm not quite sure who that is.
Oh, right in front of some of our prototypes. That was Dan McDonald, who was second. Just a tough spot for Vitaldis to get back going. Hopefully not a lot of damage and more trouble. That's going to be in the S's. That is Kevin Fanning. He was doing a pretty good job. Believe he was up into 12th overall, 6th or 7th in the GT class. A lot of damage on that. I believe that's a Ferrari.
I think it's a Ferrari at this point.
It's hard to tell.
Right. A little bit of damage there to the right front of Fanning's machine, as we'll get a look at one of the replays, about 3 or 4 incidents that we're working our way through here. So this is one of the BMWs that went around. Not quite sure who it is, because there were so many things that we're paying attention.
That's Vitaldis.
So, but since Vitaldis, who went around over in the corner, and a good look from the prototypes here, who just escaped this.
Yeah, I think this is on board with Dan McDonald going through the right-hander and just nowhere to go. Vitaldis just trying to get back going, clips the guardrail. Hopefully not a lot of damage for McDonald. He does have about a 4-second gap between him and Sabian Ragster for second. So hopefully he can hang on to that. Hopefully not a lot of damage for him. You can see that replay again, just clips. Just a little bit of left side damage for McDonald. Hopefully not too much of a disadvantage here at the Glen. Kevin Fanning down and away, and that car looks pretty much brand new, James.
Kevin Fanning is down and away.
Oh, as soon as he gets out. Oh, this is the replay. Okay. I was going to say, that is horrible luck.
Jinxing everybody here. While all that has happened, worth noting that Lance Nasir becomes the next prototype to end up in trouble. Gets on the grass on the exit of, I believe, turn 8. The heel of the boot looped it around, significant front end damage. He's in the pits. I think night is probably over for Lance Nasir. And so this is now a battle of attrition. And if you haven't been paying attention, worth noting that Savion Rankster and Robert Lowry are now within half a second for the final podium spot, both overall and the prototype class.
Good to see those guys battling. Jack Belton, our amateur leader in the GTA class, he has pitted. He is down and away. He will resume back onto the track. And looking at the gap between Lazier and McDonald after that excursion out of turn 9 in the boot, he is now 30 seconds behind our leader of the prototype class, Sam Adams. We mentioned the delta on pit road, about 4 seconds slower. He was around 11 seconds before pit stops. He is now 13.8, 14 seconds for him to make up in only 20 minutes, James.
Lots of time and not a lot of time to do it. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one to keep track of. Jake Fisher, currently your leader amongst the amateurs. Chris Wett's right behind him in second, so that'll also be a good battle that we'll keep our eyes on.
One of the few BMWs, that's Nate Stewart. He started towards the back as well, was involved in that huge big wreck on the exit of the S's in the sprint race. He started 34th overall. Right behind Ray Kingsbury now. He is in 12th now overall. Put him, I believe that's 7th, now 6th in the GT class. So a great effort. Nate Stewart just has not had the luck this year. Had the pace of Daytona and have a lot to show for it at the end. And hopefully if Nate Stewart can make his way through the field like he has and finish here, might be on his way for a top 5. As right now he's got Ryan Andrew all over the back of him. This is a battle for position as they go into the bus stop.
Continuing to hold off Ryan Andrew is Nate Stewart. While they fight, we will take our final commercial break of the evening. And when we come back, it will be the finish from Watkins Glen International in the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series here on FTG. More action to come in just a moment. to make their way through, and Robert Lowry just misjudged it, got all in to Savion Ragster, and those two were fighting for third in the prototype class. Now, I guess they're only going to be fighting for third even more to allow Dan McDonald to get away, but Ragster and Lowry now with significant damage to their machines, and this may become a battle of whoever is rolling glass might have the opportunity to make things happen. There's trouble now for Cody Cosgrove, who I think has lost a motor and is now out of the race in the GT class.
And listen to the comms as we looked at that wreck in the prototype class. That was for third. Guerrilla gets into the back of him as they enter the S's, and Guerrilla claims that maybe Cosgrove lifted a little bit. Cosgrove obviously disagreed, and that takes Cosgrove out of the running. That was a battle for fourth in the GT class, so that is just a tough break, and he is still... This is after or before? This is before. Okay, so Guerrilla gets loose. Cosgrove passes. And we'll have to let this roll here just for a little bit. Guerrilla will try to pass not only in turn 1, but in turn 2, and that's where all the action happens, James.
Come out of 11. Down the front straightaway, Cosgrove moves over to block. Guerrilla follows to catch the draft. Then he slides to the outside and tries to outbrake and make the pass to the outside of one. Then looks for the crossover on the exit. Gets right up on the rear bumper of Cosgrove. And then I think this is all going to come down. Cosgrove just, big hit there. But it's almost like he got loose with the curving on the outside, almost as he was trying to over arc it on the entry to the S's and just got caught up there.
Going back to the prototype incident, Lowry behind Ragster. Lowry just tries to show the nose, and Ragster just doesn't know he's there. Brian Sohn, a couple other GT drivers involved in that one as well, just nowhere to go. Ragster continues on, but Lowry is pretty much done for the day. He has also brought it into the pits with the tow. He is done. We've looked at this battle before we went to break between Ryan Andrew and Nate Stewart. It was a battle for 7th. Now it's going to be a battle for 6th with Cosgrove effectively done as well. But that Ferrari right now just hounding that BMW as they go through. And it looks like, and we mentioned it in the break, James, that Ryan Andrew is being held up in a lot of spots by Nate.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt, especially when you consider that Andrew's got the clean Ferrari and there's a little bit of damage on Nate Stewart's BMW, that Andrew has the faster of the two cars right now. The question is whether or not Andrew has the ability or can find the space to get around Nate Stewart, make the pass, and try and go after Ray Kingsbury, who's now about 8 seconds up the road. This is a test, not of pace, but of racecraft for Ryan Andrew to try and find space to make the pass on Nate Stewart.
And as you mentioned, it's just they're pretty much in their own zip code, so they really don't have to worry about themselves at this point. Stewart a little bit wide through the left-hander or through the right-hander, going through the top-end left-hander to exit the boot, and Andrew just closes that gap. It seems like in a couple sections, Nate Stewart does pull away just a little bit, but Andrew with that cleaner Ferrari closes it in the more technical sections, and especially through the S's. He gets that slipstream from that massive BMW through the S's and down the back straight. And this might be a good opportunity for him to make a pass. Goes to the outside of turn 1. If he can hang on to this, he might have the advantage going into turn 2.
Maybe just keeps it there on the curve. What an exit out of the corner there for Ryan Andrew to at least be alongside Nate Stewart. He'll be inside as they come through the S's, then outside as they work their way back. And I think he got loose on the curves there, or Stewart just got a really good run through them. But now here comes Andrew, who's going to have the draft and may have the opportunity to send it off to the inside of Nate Stewart as they enter the inner loop, but he'll think better of it, and Stewart will maintain the position yet again. It's been this way for about the last 3 or 4 laps, and all the while, Ryan Andrew continues to lose time to Ray Kingsbury, who is beating Nate Stewart on lap times by about a second per over the last handful.
Yeah, and right in front of Kingsbury is that Michael Guerrilla car. We talked about getting involved with Cosgrove a handful of minutes ago. He is now being hounded by the fellow Mercedes in Kingsbury. Only about a half second in front of him is that Guerrilla car. So we'll see a battle for position there any minute now as they go up into the uphill section of the boot. Guerrilla has just been a little bit off the pace. Not sure if he got any damage, more battling for position behind him. Andrew looking pretty much anywhere that Stewart will let him. Just gets stuck on the outside of all these corners. Really good defensive driving so far from Stewart in that BMW. It's almost like that BMW's half the track there, James.
Something like that as we continue. Oh, big break there from Nate Stewart, who got on the brakes very, very late, and just nowhere for Brian Andrew to really set this up. It's almost like he could use maybe I don't know if a slow spot on the racetrack is the right way to put it, but just somewhere where you'd have a little bit more braking. And the problem is that it's just all really tight braking zones, left, right, center.
And every time Andrew just gets any kind of run, Stewart is there to block it. Once again, and we're going to look at the battle for position again, Kingsbury has caught Guerrilla as they catch some lap traffic in front of them. That is Sachit Vitaldis. He's been involved in a handful of accidents. He tries to get out of the way of this battle for position, but two great battles here late in the running, 11 minutes to go. And trouble again in the S's. And he is off track. Looking to get a number for that one. More trouble. That's
Brandon
Lambert?
Yeah, Brandon Lambert, who was pretty high up in the running order. He was, I think, somewhere 6th, 7th in class. He's down back to 10th in class. As Ryan Andrew is there to the inside of Nate Stewart. I think now, finally, Andrew's going to make this pass into the heel of the boot and maybe coming out of it back into the NASCAR section.
Not so fast.
Oh, wow. What a big move from Nate Stewart on the outside to dive it in deep and just send it all the way with the brake.
Matt Kingsbury around once again. Not as much good fortune than his brother and Matt. Going back to this battle, Andrew looks to the left side of Stewart. And Stewart seems to just know where to put his car in this battle. He knows if he puts Andrew on the left-hand side, especially when there's a right-hander coming up, he's going to have the advantage. Stewart does not get a good exit on turn 11. We saw this about a lap ago. Andrew next to him through turn 1. If he can hang on here into the S's, that might be his best shot. And he's going to have the momentum, and he might get the pass here, James.
Contact there coming out of turn 1. That might be enough to keep Stewart alongside the way he needs to. Andrew, though, just trying to pull this off. Stewart's going to come back to the inside. It will be a door-to-door battle once again, coming down into the inner loop. And what does Ryan Andrew do? What does Nate Stewart do? They are virtually even. Andrew's going to back off and let Stewart have it yet again.
Oh, Stewart got loose and contact. They finally do it. Oh, they keep going. Andrew notices that was his fault. They keep going. And they start all over again. Hopefully not a lot of damage on these guys. These guys are battling for position here.
Don't think Andrew has a lot of damage, but yep, another sportsman move from Ryan Andrew to back it down once Stewart went sideways and go back to racing these two. This has really been some incredible stuff between these two. Probably the best racing I think we've seen all night.
So we hit 8 minutes and change remaining in this race. The tension's just going to keep increasing. We're going to get a quick replay. Not sure who this is, but they are crab walking. Gary Freeman, he has had a tough night, and he had a ton of damage coming out of the pits. I'm surprised he's even still out there. Gets himself spun and just in a horrible spot. And we saw this earlier. Brandon Lambert just gets loose on the exit or on the entrance of the bus stop. Slaps that guardrail. He keeps going. Granted, with a wounded car, he is 12th overall. Put him 9th in the class, in the GT class overall. A couple other notable things. Jake Fisher at this point. Jack Belton has had trouble at some point. Jake Fisher and Chris Wetz, your top two in the GTM class. This is Marcus Ciasco. He hits the tire barrier, and they don't move in iRacing. That is pretty much a solid object. And we go back to this battle for 6. Saw this live. A little bit of sportsmanship there after the incidental contact between Ryan Andrew and Nate Stewart. They continue to battle.
Going back to that battle between Nate Stewart and Ryan Andrew, and now you've got the lap machine. That's Robert Lowry coming to the inside of both of them in the prototype to clear them and continue to work his way around the racetrack. He is pretty much set for a P4 finish unless somebody in our top 3 amongst the prototypes has an incident and ends up in trouble. In the meantime, though, back to Stewart, back to Andrew, continuing to watch these two go after each other. I don't know if Andrew's quite got the same pace that he had or whether or not it's just taking him a few laps to get back into rhythm after that incident with Nate Stewart, but it doesn't seem like that Ferrari quite has the speed that it did before they got together.
Well, as you mentioned, Nate Stewart did have a little bit of damage, probably didn't get that much more damage as there's trouble ahead of them, a little bit of smoke, but no incident to be seen. One of the BMWs back to the track, and I think there's a little bit of equalizer here, James. I think you're right, that's maybe Ryan Andrew has a little bit of damage, and that kind of will set the equalized pace between the two, but Ryan Andrew just has a huge run, and he's done this about 3 or 4 times now. On the exit of 1, tries to get the momentum, uses all that runoff, got to get back in time, back to the rumble strip. You can get a slowdown through there, but he is trying to clear Nate Stewart, and he might do it. Nope, not quite.
At this point, I'm surprised that Ryan Andrew hasn't tried to go shallower into turn 1 and cross over Nate Stewart on corner exit. He's tried that outside lane about 3 or 4 times, and it just hasn't worked. I would figure at this point you're at least looking to try and do something else, given that you've tried the same approach in that corner 3 or 4 times, and it just hasn't come up with any sort of returns for you. But there could also maybe be a slip up here. We've seen these two go door to door through the boot as well. So maybe Ryan Andrew thinks his better opportunity is through this part of the circuit instead.
Justin Robichaud, he is smoking. He's currently 26. I believe he had that big contact. There he is. Just trying to limp it back to the pits. He will effectively be done for the day once he brings that BMW in to pit road, back to the battle. This is on the downhill section of the boot. Still, Nate Stewart just hanging on versus Ryan Andrew. This will be for 6th. As long as anyone else in front of them do not have any issues. And we've had trouble. Michael Gonzalez is now 3rd in the GT class.
Gonna go back and figure out what happened to Michael Gonzalez. Not quite sure how he lost the lead in class, but somehow it's Sam Adams who's in control of this.
I believe you might be right. We got a note from our producer, and you're right. He did have to pit for fuel, did not take enough fuel. We wonder why he was about 4 seconds quicker, and that is the difference. That gives the lead to Sam Adams. Burkhardt now in 2nd, Gonzalez back to 3rd as these guys still battling for 6th down the backstretch once again.
What does Ryan Andrew do at this point, and how do you approach the inner loop this time as we're now down to under 4 minutes to go as you look on board with Ryan Andrew easing his way up back towards Nate Stewart, coming through the carousel down to the entry of the boot, the inside of the ankle as they continue to go. He's going to try and take the outside and hit the curve there, but Stewart again holding him up. And all the while, we've not really mentioned Santiago Tires yet, but with these two continuing to fight, Tires has managed to close up into this, and this could become a 3-car battle in short order.
Mentioned on the starting grid, he started in last, 34th in class, 44th overall. He has made his way up into 8th. And Santi is in one of those very strong, very fast Mercedes. So if these guys continue to battle for position, I think you're right. I think he not only has the pace, but these guys have been fighting. Their tires are hot. They've been running 146s. Last time by, Santi ran a 144.4. And I think you're right. I think if he can get there, I believe he's going to pass both of them. 2 minutes and 50 seconds left remaining. Probably 2 or 3 laps at most left in the race.
Not a lot of time to get the job done. Ryan Andrew now going to go short, and I think he did try and pull the crossover just a little bit, but look at Santiago Tires, who has chopped this down, and what was maybe about a 1.5 second gap a lap ago, now gonna be maybe 3/10, and we've been watching Andrew and Stewart. It may be Tires who gets the job done on Ryan Andrew, who now goes to the inside to block Tires going to the inner loop.
Tires looks left, gonna follow Stewart on the ideal lane into the bus stop. 3-car battle now for 6th. Down to 5-second lead for the lead. Sam Adams maybe saving a little bit of fuel in the lead. We'll have to keep an eye on that. Now down to 4.4. Back to the battle here for 6. Here comes Andrew on the outside. Santi maybe taking advantage. He goes to the inside of Andrew. He's going to have the lane. Is he going to have the momentum? Still side by side. Nate Stewart loving every minute of that. Is it going to the right-hander?
Continuing to push, continuing to fight, continuing to roll. Here comes Tires, maybe looking to the inside, coming out of the toe. Andrew now dropping to the bottom to make the block, so Tires is going to run up high, and I wonder if Tires is going to try and pull the crossover or stay to the outside of Andrew coming through the heel of the boot. He tried to stay outside and just washed out. No grip whatsoever, so Andrew maintains the position for the moment. 1 minute and 23 seconds to go here, and the question now is, where is Flynn Lazier over in the carousel? So these drivers now.
Oh, we nearly had a wreck for second in the GT class. Robert Lowry tried to pass them in the grass, nearly wrecked both of them. Gonzalez was on the outside of Burkhardt. He had to check up for that. These guys have caught Adams by about 2 to 3 seconds each lap. This is going to be really tight, I believe, for Sam Adams to make it on
contact,
fuel.
there we go. There goes Ryan Andrew around in turn 1. He went to the outside of Nate Stewart, and that was boiling and bubbling over, and it finally spilled, did the cauldron, as Andrew just tried to turn down on Nate Stewart and didn't have the room to do it. And so now it's on Santiago Tires to do what Ryan Andrew couldn't, as Tires now heads to the outside, and there's a prototype right in the mix too as they come back towards the track. You see the battle here for first and second as there's contact with the GTs. There goes Nate Stewart sideways, and what Ryan Andrew couldn't do, Santiago Tires does. And now Michael Gonzalez now back up into second in GTs overall. He's going to clear Burkhardt for the moment as Burkhardt continues to work to the rear bumper of Gonzalez, but Gonzalez with that pace, with that speed, going to clear him, and now he's got a few laps here to try and get after Sam Adams.
White flag this time by Lazier has already taken it. Here comes Sam Adams. Can he hang on? Had about a 5.5 second lead over Burkhardt, just trying to save as much fuel as he can. Loses a little bit of momentum through 1. Gonzalez now closes it down to a 1.5 seconds, down to 1.2 seconds. May get down to a second as they go up the S's. He's got the run. He's got the speed. Can he get to his dead zone teammate? 0.8 seconds, 7, almost a half second as they go into the bus stop for the final time.
He'll be there. There's no doubt about it. The question is whether or not he can make the move. It's going to take a big move from Michael Gonzalez to try and make this happen and get the class victory. Through the carousel they go. Don't forget Morgan Burkhardt is there as well as Flynn Lazier works his way through the final bit of the boot. Here comes Gonzalez. He'll be on the outside as they come through the angle. He's going to shoot it around Sam Adams, or at least try to. Adams is going to try and hang on the inside, but Gonzalez is going to have that preferred lane on the bottom coming through the toe of the boot. Michael Gonzalez is going to make the pass, and so does Morgan Burkhardt. So the 2 GT cars clear Sam Adams as Buddy Lazier, or rather Flynn Lazier, comes out of the final corner to win overall at Watkins Glen. He'll take P1. What
Adams
does
is out of
Morgan
fuel.
Burkhardt do now?
Adams is out of fuel. Burkhardt and Gonzalez. This is the battle for the win in the GT class. Through the right-hander, Sam Adams did not make it. This is the battle for the GT win. Through the left-hander, here they go into turn 10. Gonzalez starting to gap Burkhardt as they go into turn 10.
It's the desperation throw of the headlights and the flicker just to try and get in the head of Michael Gonzalez, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Off the final corner, he had to pit twice. We thought he might be out of it, but Michael Gonzalez recovers beautifully with a storming run in the final few laps to take victory here at Watkins Glen in the GT Pro class of the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series at Watkins Glen. And a big call to Jake Fisher too, who is just clear of Chris Wetz by about a half second. He is on course to win the GT Am class.
Great battles all around. We saw last week a photo finish for the prototype win. This week down to only a handful of tenths of a second, 2-3 tenths for the lead. A last lap pass effectively for Gonzalez. Pitted a second time. As you see Sam Adams, he is just out of fuel. Chris Wetz trying to do everything he can to catch Jake Fisher. He might be able to make some kind of shot here. He's only 4 car lengths back, not going to be enough. I believe Jake Fisher is going to win the amateur class, but a fantastic race all around for these guys. Jake Fisher will win The amateur class, Chris Wetz, will finish in second.
Wild finish to GT proceedings here at Watkins Glen in the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series. Great racing amongst our GT drivers, in particular in the final 15 minutes of tonight's event. But all said and done, all cars wrapped up with their race, and there's the push. You can see Sam Adams getting a little bit of help to try and make it back to the start-finish line. A big call to Ethan Kurtz there, who's pushing the one Mercedes to make sure that the other Mercedes can make it across the line and finish off the race.
Not sure if this is legal. I know it's not legal in NASCAR, but Sam Adams trying to finish this race. I don't know if he's going to have enough time. I believe it's over, but so he will finish the first car one lap down, 15th overall, put him in 12th in the GT class overall. Tough break for Sam Adams, just did not put enough fuel in it for his one and only pit stop. I thought he did have the right call. He did have the right strategy. Once Gonzalez pitted, I thought he was going to be able to make it, but just did not have enough. That is a tough break to go from having a shot to the win to thinking that you did everything you could to get the win to losing everything with only 45 seconds left in the race.
We've seen wilder finishes in sports car racing as Flynn Lazier is your overall winner and top man of the prototypes, clear of Dan McDonald by a minute, who finishes second overall. Your podium for the prototypes and overall completed by Savion Ragster. Michael Gonzalez is your winner in GT Pro. Morgan Burkhardt and Michael Griglia complete the podium in GT Pro. They were 4th, 5th, and 6th overall, respectively. Ray Kingsbury, Santiago Tires, and Nate Stewart, 7th, 8th, and 9th overall. And your winner in GT Am, Jake Fisher, who finishes overall in 10th.
Chris Wetz, a valiant effort yet again in the amateur class. He will finish second in the amateur class, 11th overall. Brandon Lambert, surprising, still had a great effort despite being in that big wreck in the bus stop. He finishes in 12th. 13th, Kevin Fanning. Ryan Andrew, 14th. Sam Adams, a tough finish. He finishes in 15th. Matt Kingsbury, 16th. Brian Sohn, he finishes in 3rd in the amateur class. Jack Belton, 4th. Ryan Pendicio, he finishes 19th overall and 5th overall in the amateur class. Nate Clark in the BMW.
21st overall was Brock Quinn. Kieran Forrest finished 22nd overall. 23rd was Robert Lowry. Marwin Mafta was 24th. 25th this evening went to Kenneth Askew. Ethan Kurtz was 26th. Alexander Ball was 27th. Justin Robichaud was 28th. 29th went to Dave Askew. And Sachit Vitaldis was 30th.
31st, Cody Crosgrove. We saw that incident between him and Guerrilla was great the entire race until the last 6th or so. Gary Freeman, a lot of accidents, but he somehow finishes in 32nd. Lance Nasir, tough break between him and his dead zone teammate. And Blake Reynolds, he finishes 33rd overall. 34th, Marcus Iasco. Justin Garris, 35th. Bronson Stafford, 36th. And a lion's share of our retirees from the prototype division, 37th, 38th, and 39th. That's Reynolds, Bergoli, and Carroll. And Spencer Ray will finish in 40th. Rounding out the field, Robert Kenny, he finishes in 41st. Some of the guys who did not take time in the race, Jeffrey McConey, Joey Mashevitz, and William Dunbar round out the rest of the field.
That completes your overall field in the main race for the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series at Watkins Glen International. Now time to bring in our class winners for interviews and a few chats and see just how everything panned out here. We'll get those to you momentarily, but Kevin McAdams, that was wild, and I take that back. We now have our first driver, and it is our winner in the GT Pro class, Michael Gonzalez, here with us. And Michael, take us through the fuel strategy and the decision to pit twice. Was that something that you had planned all along, or did you have to adapt just off the fuel numbers that you were getting during the race?
No, that was an absolute disaster of a call when I did the refuel. I really thought that filling it like a lap-ish short compared to the time would even itself out at the end, and I was like 3-4 laps short, so I kind of had to pit again. It was a bit of a mess.
A bit of a mess. But it ended up working out for you in the end, especially when you consider that Sam Adams essentially played the old strategy and pitted once and didn't have enough fuel to make it in the end. So you ended up with the sort of blessing in disguise. But were you, I don't know if aware is the right word, but I guess, how much were you watching fuel and how much were you just trying to go after it, especially after that final pit stop, knowing that you had the ground to make up?
I was not aware of the fuel until about 14 minutes left in the race, when I was asked, are we going to make it on fuel? And I looked and we were not making it on fuel. And that was just a place on my end. I wanted to full fuel it so that I wouldn't have to deal with what I just did. And I decided against it and do a short fuel off the time like you would in like an IMSA race or something, and just completely missed the number entirely. It was, and then I almost got speeding in the pits. I forgot to set the pit limiter on pit exit. So I was full throttle at like 65 and a 40 and somehow didn't get speeding. So that was a little bit wild.
And how crazy were those last 15 minutes once you were done with the final pit stop? Were you at 100%, 110%, 120%? How hard were you pushing to try and get back to the front?
It was if I crashed, then it was deserved sort of thing. So, I don't know. I was clipping the grass on corner entry quite a few times. Would have at least gone a pretty spectacular crash there. But I came out of the pits 3.5, 4 seconds back and was like, no, there's no shot. I'm going to catch him, and somehow ended up doing it. And I knew that Sam was hardcore saving, trying to make it because he had more fuel than I did because he pitted later than me. He had like a lap or so more. It just wasn't quite enough for him to save, but he was trying his hardest there.
He was digging, no question. You were digging, and incredibly exciting. What do you take away from this experience in the win tonight?
I mean, it was a lot of fun. I don't normally do league races, let alone oval or road races to begin with. So this was lots of fun, something new. You know, this new car that they have is tons of fun to drive. So, you know, getting some laps in it, having some fun, you know, away from the iRating and you know, safety rating races. Just have fun, full brawls in a league race. Great times.
Michael Gonzalez, winner in the GT Pro category here for the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series at Watkins, Glen, Kevin McAdams.
Thanks, James. And we're going to have momentarily Jake Fisher, who started 38th due to what might be the largest road course wreck I've ever seen. Jake, you were involved in that massive accident on lap 2 in the sprint race. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about having to not only deal with that, maybe deal with, you know, man, I got to go all the way through this field, but talk to us about driving through the field to get back to the front to get this amateur win.
Well, I think you put that pretty well. That was probably the biggest thing I've ever seen on a road course. One of the Ferraris just like rolled back across the track. I got involved, and then the whole rest of the field behind me piled in. And I guess the way to look at it is it gave me time to think about how to not get involved in that again in the feature. So starting at the back doesn't really bother me. It gives me a little bit of patience and practice to pick through everybody if I was quick enough. And I felt like this gradual spirits Mercedes was. So just kind of took my time and tiptoed around and just ran my own race and tried to keep the mistakes to a minimum, and ended up second or third before the pit stop, chasing down Brian pretty good, and figured I'd undercut him and try to get in there as quick as I could, and it ended up working out.
Well, we heard from Gonzalez that, you know, he did not get the fuel right. Did you know where you needed to be on fuel? Did you know when you needed to come in to do just that? And we're watching your wreck from the sprint race. Did you know when you had to come in and pit to make that undercut?
Roughly. I mean, this is only like the second or third time I'm using a new software. I'm using RaceLab software. I used to use CAPS, which was pretty accurate, but switched to RaceLab here to try it out. And I was a little hesitant because it kind of just gives you a fuel window. And the window kind of moved right around the time that I wanted to pit, but I just kind of left it go and ran an extra lap or two and then pit when it told me to. And, you know, a couple minutes towards the end there, 2-3 laps to go, it was giving me low fuel warnings, and I was like, I don't know if I made the right choice. We'll find out. But then the white flag came out, and I had a 1.5-second buffer, I think, on Chris Wett. So I just opened her up and let her eat for the last lap.
Yeah, Wett's got really close, but you do come away with the win. How do you fare? How do you think you'll fare next week if you decide to come back?
I'd love to run the whole season. I only missed last week. I didn't have a conversion kit for my Fanatec wheel since I run the VRS direct drive. So unfortunately, I missed the first week because that package came in the day after the race. But I want to run the rest of the season. It's a fun little project. I don't do a whole lot of road racing. This is my first time in a GT car in probably 2 years. So it's a fun little fresh new thing to do to take up my Thursday nights.
Well, Jake, good win. I'm sure you'll have very similar pace at COTA. We'll see you hopefully on September the 8th.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. And big shout out to the Garage Oil Spirits folks, Ron over there, and American Badass Whiskey. They came on for this race and for the rest of the season with myself and a couple other people across iRacing. So this is kind of their first foray into it. And great way to start with them and Danis Utilities and Black Sheep Property.
Good job on the shout out. Some people don't do that. You're very good.
Gotta
like
take
you've
care
done
of
this
them.
before. Yes.
Gotta take care of them.
All right, man. You have a good night.
All right. Thank you guys. You too.
James, I think this might be up on my list of one of the most chaotic road course races, and I've covered some bottom split 24-hour races. I think this might be up there as far as craziness. Unfortunately, we don't get to talk to Flynn, but I think he would have just said, yeah, I pretty much dominated this whole thing.
Yeah, no, I think the story with Flynn is not necessarily so much about what he did in the sim today and what was announced in real life. We'll see if we can get him. We'll take a few moments just to see if we can't grab Flynn Lazier for a word. I know he was around a moment ago and having some technical difficulties, so we'll take a little bit of an opportunity to try and get him back in and get a few words with our overall winner. But I think I can pontificate a little bit and say that the Indy Lights deal he announced with Able Motorsports, but the culmination of a lot of work, but a really, really big deal for someone who very much, I think, wants to go IndyCar racing and someone who's always given me a lot of sort of Colton Herta-esque vibes. Very young, but immense amounts of talent. It's come through in spades in the SCCA competition he's done, in the Formula Atlantic competition that he's done, where, especially beginning of this year, anything he entered in Formula Atlantic, it was just win, 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 left, right, center. So the pace is there, the speed is there, and this is someone who, if he can get a full-time ride in Indy Lights in particular, I think you're going to want to watch out for, and someone who very well could be on his way in the future to the NTT IndyCar Series.
Well, like I mentioned before, someone that did enjoy watching his dad race back in the early 2000s. It's cool to see not only someone of his caliber on the sim racing side, but slowly making his way through the open wheel ranks. So maybe a guy, if he sounds like he's as good as Colton Herta around that same echelon, I think he's due for a very successful career. But once again, he just absolutely dominated tonight. Just the class of the field completely annihilated the rest of the prototype drivers. And the one thing that, you take for granted in these races is he had a clean race. We saw on the replay there, just he had to avoid a lot of traffic, a lot of GT cars all night, and not only that, but keep the race clean and have a good strategy. So great win for Flynn here tonight, Watkins Glen.
Fantastic win for Flynn Lazier, your overall winner in the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series at Watkins Glen. A great night of racing here. So for all of us at FTF, for Kevin McAdams, my cohort here in the booth, and our director, producer, visual man extraordinaire, Zach Johnson, I'm James Pike. Thanks so much for tuning in to our broadcast, the SimCAR Penguin RC Grand Am Series on FTF_GG.